Hopefully it's allowed me to rejoin the same one. Yeah, my whole Streamlabs and everything crashed just then. I think I need to bite the bullet, and when we've hit a particular milestone on Patreon or something, just buy a whole new computer, because this is starting to get difficult to do my job. Right. We haven't reached any of the delivery points yet. I'm just going to check and see where we're streaming to on the tubes. Hello, one viewers. I had a stream and it crashed, so I started a new one. This is Vampire Delivery Service if you've just come in from outside. We're doing 2 games about delivery today. The second one is Pigeon Guild, and that looked like it was a bit more of an RPG, so might need a little bit longer. Hey, Fangs. That sounds like a vampire name. Is this your game, Fang? Oof. Oh. We have a very good justification in this game for like the lack of fall damage as well. We can just sort of like experiment and try stuff with it being relatively low low stakes. Pardon the pun. You know, get it? Vampires, low stakes. This is like a, you know, like a Only Up type game, but with a more serious mood and setting as well, which I kind of like. Because the thing is, I usually quite enjoy simple games that just do one thing very well, but those kind of like Bennett Foddy style games where everything is kind of goofy asset mashing, I sort of understand the appeal, but I always like there to be a little bit of fantasy in games most of the time. There we go. I feel like I should shut that fridge afterwards. Like when you put the blood in, it needs to close, because otherwise it feels like you're not doing your job properly. Okay, we finally got one. Hi, Sub-Zero. Is it your game? Yeah, it's not. This is Vampire Every. Every seemed to be the delivery service in the UK that everyone's complaining about at the moment. When you get all the memes about truck drivers like throwing your parcel on the roof or something like that, they seem to have all switched to Every in the last year or so. I've got that. I've got one of those delivery lockers right near my house now, so things get dropped off there, and I still haven't got over how strange it feels to use those delivery lockers. I don't know if they have them everywhere, but it feels very cyberpunk to go and scan your phone on a locker in the street and get goodies from it. Oh, Acrylic, you need to get like a doorbell that plays a soothing sound. Like just a gentle doorbell that goes, ah. Now, the thing that's happening here in terms of the gameplay is I'm searching around for this lowest point delivery point, right? Because I don't want to miss that one out before I start trying to climb up here and get the others. But I just can't find out where it is. And part of that makes me think that the developer is trolling me, and the entry point to get there is going to actually be at the top of the level. Like, you have to climb the whole level and drop down a pit to deliver the last one, which, to be fair, is, if that's the case, that is very funny, and I like it. But I definitely wouldn't do it as, like, an early thing in a game. I would do that in, like, a later level of a game, so that there's something for people to really get their teeth into. Because I can't find the way to this one. And it is starting to make me think it's a troll level where you can't get to it from the bottom and you have to go some other way. So maybe we just ignore that one for now. And then if we need to, we can drop back down. It seems like you don't die from full damage. You can drop a long way, and it's only dropping out of the level that resets you, which is kind of helpful. I think if you wanted to expand this and like build on the sort of story and theme side of it, it could be very cool to have the occasional NPC who is just sort of sitting outside their house dangling their legs over the side, and they have like one line of sort of bit crushed dialogue to say to you when you go up to them, you know. Because it feels like the platforming is almost enough for a game. I don't feel like I'm learning the level very well, but that's because it's such a strange level. But what they have done here, which I think is a really helpful thing to do when you're making 3D spaces, is none of this is symmetrical, right? So every part of it looks kind of different, and it looks different from different angles as well, which I think is one of the things that should be a goal when we sort of got I guess this is kind of a spiral shaped level because it's very small and relatively round, and you're just working your way up, which means that there's not a lot of kind of just going around on the same level. You're always looking for the next way up to the next set of things. That was a strange jump. Why did I jump so high that time? Felt like something allowed me to do a big jump then. I'm just going to check the itch page again and just check that I haven't missed some additional control that we've got. No, I don't think we have. We've got the game running 3 times. There we go. I had the intro music running the whole time then. Turn my dancing self off for a moment so we can... Ah, here we go. So sometimes you will go on to a new bit, and this is kind of good as well. I think this is a good thing. I come here, I think this is the next thing because it's the most obvious thing, and actually I was supposed to look up here and see this route. And I think, you know, given that what I said earlier of like the looking around and finding the route is part of the mechanics of this game, right? It's the puzzle that makes the first person platforming work. That's a good sort of thing. You wanna have like what feels like a fork where you could go either way, and one way is more obvious. So you initially see that and you go, oh yeah, that's the way I'm supposed to go, and then you realize actually there's a fork off from it that you didn't notice because it wasn't as obvious. That would be... There's some situations if you're making like a linear action adventure game where getting lost and navigation is not one of the skills you're supposed to be testing, that would be bad, right? But because here your jumping is one of the skills you're testing, and your navigation and route finding is one of the skills, we actually want the route finding to be a little bit challenging. Well, so the music was part of the game, but it was the start screen music. I'm finding this a bit empty without music, so let's go... We want something like dark jazz comedy. We don't want comedy. Jazz, dark, ambient, mysterious. There is actually a genre called dark jazz, which is sort of like perfect. This isn't quite it. This is all just moody jazz. But like dark jazz is stuff like the Kilimanjaro Dark Jazz Ensemble, which would work very, very well with this. Because it would be like, you know, like what's that genre that they use in anime? It's like called cafe jazz or something. It's like that but scary, you know. That would work very well for this type of game. I don't think that route is getting me anywhere. And someone in the chat said it feels very random, the level design. I think there's definitely a case for that. I think some guiding lights wouldn't hurt. And the thing about lights in a game like this is you can get a lot of sort of aesthetic variation out of different color lights, right? So you can have an area that's all red lights up in a particular way, and then an area that's green lights or whatever, and then you get sort of, you get a lot, it's like a, you get a lot out of that simple change because the textures then look different in different parts of the level, and that helps with navigation as well. Yeah, noir is exactly what we're looking for. This is just sort of like bittersweet. We do want noir soundtrack music with a little bit of electronics, you know? We basically want Blade Runner music. That's what we want. Sorry devs, but if you have a game with no music in, I will sit here doing music choice for ages. I think it's helpful as well. It's like it's one of those things where you're probably going to have to do it at some point anyway, so having someone else talk through what they would do. Let us fusionize. Let's try that. So I don't really know if we're going to get up to one of the next ones. I think this might just be a case of like designer-itis, where the developer has played it so much that they don't realize how hard it is to work out what the route is. So I think what you might need to do is make the route up to the, like the first 4 bags on the way up, right? Make that route relatively well signposted with lights and stuff like that. And then as you get higher up the tower, it can become a bit more like this. It can become a bit more obscure and harder to find. But if the first sort of set of things is too hard to find, then people will think, well, it's so hard for me to find this first set that I'm never going to find the last ones, you know? And then when you couple that with the fact that if we fall down, we're kind of starting all over again, that's quite harsh generally. Okay, so hello. We're not doing the AI discussion today. You know the answer. It's not that hard to make or find music that you can use. And every town has amateur musicians in that think it would be really cool to be used in a video game as well. So don't fall into the trap of using tools to avoid talking to people, you know? It's a temptation we all have. Like, well, I could ask these people for a favor, or I could ask a robot for a favor, and the robot won't reject me, so I'll go with the robot. You know, it's not healthy over time, and that's sort of like the base level of how I feel about that. Loads of people making cool music, not all of them charging money for it, or charging very little. I have loads of my old music on opengameart.org, like probably about a dozen pieces of music. So if I search myself on Google, half the hits are people crediting me for a piece of music they used in their little kind of indie game or learning project. And I don't mind that I didn't get paid for it. It was just, they were just like learning tracks for me, so I was happy to just put them in a public library. Yeah, I really like this. I just think the earlier... We probably need a bit more sound on jumping, right? we think of like, we want to juice our main mechanic of jumping. I think what would work really well in a vampire game is having like a crouch and hold and leap release jump, like a almost like Angry Birds slingshot type jump. But like having stuff like whoosh around the screen when you're jumping so that we juice the main mechanic. And then in terms of the like level design, challenge structure, whatever you want to call it, I think just having a much clearer route up to the first few, because in order to play this game, players need to have two skills. They need to be able to do the jumping and the mobility stuff, and they need to be able to navigate the level. And I think if you handhold a little bit, for the not for the whole level, just for the first couple of things they need to find, then by the time they've done that, they will have mastered how to control the character, and then you can transition to having them need to navigate the world, right? Because it's very easy to get lost in this bottom sort of ghetto of the tower. And we're going to spend a lot of time down here anyway, because every time we fail and fall down, we're going to end up down here. So we don't want to make it too difficult to get from here to the first 2 or 3 blood bags up the top. Once we get up the top, it can get way more obtuse and obscure. And I wouldn't necessarily want to, I'm not saying like slap a load of yellow paint on the game, but I think doing some like guiding lights and stuff like that to maybe like if the dev is watching this and you're getting really frustrated because you know there's a route that I should be taking at this stage, that's maybe an indication that, okay, early on in the game, that route needs to be lit up or something to draw the attention. And that's an example of, if you do it, it's like a high value thing to implement, because adding the lighting then is serving as a navigation tool and making the gameplay work better, but it's also making the level more beautiful and varied, right? Because if we look up, I love how dismal this is. I think it's really neat how sort of bleak and dismal this is, and how we've got this strange mix of like this is like a gothic medieval village, right? This is straight up Transylvania down here, but then you've got these bits built on top of it that are like 1970s tower blocks, and I really like what is happening with the environment here and the story it tells about how this vampire enclave has formed, and the social strata of like the richer vampires being up there, and that's why we need to get up there and deliver to them. But if we had some guiding lighting, we would also have a kind of more visually varied level, because we would have areas that were cast in different colors and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I can find the route up to the first one. So I'm going to stop this in a minute because we're just wandering around. I really love the mood of this. I could definitely see this working as a full game. I mean, this is a good start as well. Like having tutorializing the double jump by just putting you in a place where you can't leave this without sort of experimenting until you find out there's a double jump. Oh, I've got a dash. I didn't realize I had a dash on. I have a air dash on shift that I haven't found out about. Okay, we'll take one more run at it with that knowledge. Music's gone a bit happy again. Let's do yeah, that makes sense. Left click impulse jump. Aim down right after double jump. Gives 1 extra jump. Okay. So that's like a pulse that you can fire at the ground to do a third jump. Okay, let's try this. Do I have to be aiming right? Aim down right after double jump. Ah, that's the impulse jump. You have to do it exactly after the second jump, like a split second after. Okay, let's try this. Armed with the knowledge of the pause screen. And some trip hop music. Let's do it. And an air dash. What's the super jump? Keep jumping to build momentum and reach higher. Press jump right as you land from a long fall for a super jump. Okay. So you can kind of bounce. I would say a dev as well. As soon as you've got this to a stage where you feel like it's worth building into something bigger and continuing with, replace this screen with diagrams. So I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say a tutorial is critical at this stage of development, but making this easier to find and interpret is going to be good. So, like, you always, when you're building, like, tutorials are traditionally something you build right at the end of a dev cycle, right? Because you don't know what people don't know until the game is finished, and then you sort of work out from there what people need to learn to play the whole game. But you need to have a tutorial at some point so playtesters can play the game without you there. And I would say trying to convert this into a visual format. So you've got like you know, diagrams with arrows of what the character is doing and then images of the button presses and stuff on. That would be a good sort of midpoint between this, which is a little bit harder to access, and like a full-blown tutorial. Yeah. People will give up earlier, but you sort of have to think about what stage your dev is at and what you're trying to achieve at that stage. Because I think this is very much just at the level of trying to prove, do people find this fun? Do people think it's cool? And I think it is proving those things quite well. So then after that stage, you go, okay, we're gonna do more now. So let's make it more accessible. And like each stage, each round of testing your game with people, you sort of try and make it a little bit more accessible. But I think you can end up over developing early on if you try and build a tutorial for something that you don't know if it needs it yet, you know? Like, all games needed some sort of tutorial at some point, but you don't necessarily want to do it before you've proven if the concept works. That's why it's usually helpful to do playtesting with people who you can watch, because you can sort of explain the game to them a little bit, sort of tell them what they would be told in the tutorial so that you know they've got enough information. There's a drop-off point. Whee! That's weird that it looks like it's in the floor underneath the place where I am currently. Oh! That would have been a good time to do the old bounce off the floor, but I didn't trigger it at the right time. Kind of feel like we need a safe walk as well. Like if you hold control, you don't step off ledges, but I don't know how much of a pain that sort of thing is to implement. So there seems to be a genre of these at the moment, because I played one a few weeks ago and the dev of that called it a superstructure game. It's just like a kind of atmospheric parkour game. And I think that's totally a vibe. Like, it's something I find interesting. With something scary. We want something scary. Just going full Blade Runner that time. Ah! Oh my goodness. the having to look down to do the impulse jump is interesting because it makes it hard to sort of target where you're going. But I think that might actually be quite an interesting trade-off. Because in order to do the slightly bigger jump, you have to not look in the direction you're jumping. Right? And that... it's kind of a thing that could be bad or could be good. It's hard to really know until you've had a decent amount of time trying to master it to know if that's like a good thing or not. But it seems like it could be an interesting trade-off. That you can't always look in the direction you're jumping. It gives you something difficult to learn, you know? I keep forgetting that I've got my air dash as well. Only up, but immersive sim, yeah, totally. I was on so I've got a podcast interview coming up. I went on Josh Bice's podcast, who does Gaming Wisdom. He's had a YouTube channel for like 10 years about game design. And I had an interview with him yesterday that will be out in a few weeks. And one of the things we were talking about there that I think is an interesting thing for anyone to think about, but we were talking about how hard it is to learn game design because every sort of genre of game you could work on is basically a different approach to game design. And there are some like top level things about sort of humans and psychology that you can use in any game, right? But like what is good game design is going to vary so much depending on the type of game you're making. And we were talking about that's the reason why, you know, you get better at game design by making variations on the same thing over and over again. And one of the traps a lot of us fall into, and I'm definitely guilty of this, is like we want to make a totally different type of game every project we make, which is fine when you're learning, right? Because you want to find out what you're good at. And then but then when you're like serious about making games for other people to play, it's sort of like you need to like narrow it down, because otherwise you can't carry any learnings forward, because you're making a totally different thing every time, and it has like different, each genre has different rules that you need to learn to get good at deving it. Yeah, this is definitely for like speedrunners who want to, but I can't do it slow, let alone speedrun. So I really like this. I think the jumping is so difficult that the early stages of like learning to navigate the level are quite frustrating, and I think just doing a lighting pass on the whole thing and thinking about guiding people to some ideal routes using lighting would be a good start. Because what you could do, right, is you have your sicko routes that are good for speedrunners to find and learn, and then you have an obvious slow route that is like the quote-unquote easy way up the level, and you light that really well. So you use guiding lights to show the player at least halfway up how to get to the next bit, but then you have sort of secret shortcuts that the speedrunners can learn. And like I said, that way you're kind of killing two birds with one stone, because you're making the level look more beautiful and varied by having the lights, but you're also making it easier for kind of people to get into. Stark said, did you ever develop games? Yeah, I worked at Blizzard. That's a joke. I didn't work at Blizzard. Just like telling people I worked at Blizzard because it's funny. It's funny to me to say that. So I would say as a dev, I'm more of a hobbyist, right? make stuff for fun with no real intentions apart from because I think something would be a cool idea. And part of that is because I was joking about the Blizzard thing. I didn't work at Blizzard. I worked at a couple of small mobile companies. I got a job about 10 years ago at a small mobile company. We made games for Adult Swim games, or we made one big game for Adult Swim games and then various things for other people. And I got that job off the back of like loads of hobbyist projects where I'd made little games on my own. And like, bear in mind, I don't know, that was 2015. I think when I was making games before that, I didn't really have any intention of like really finishing them, releasing them, selling them. I just made them because I enjoyed playing around with game engines. And that's still pretty much the ethos of this channel. Like, this is not a follow my advice and you will make loads of money channel. It is a people send me stuff they're working on and it's kind of cool. And I go, oh, this is kind of cool. I think it would be slightly cooler if you did this. And then people in the chat also give their feedback because a lot of our chat are devs and have thoughts on game design as well. And yeah. Good question. How much of game design is intuition or vibe? I mean, it is. There's both sides are valid, right? The kind of rational thinking about things like a scientist side is valid, and the gut feel is valid. But you develop the gut feel by doing the first thing, right? The more you actively like analyze things and discuss them and use theory to break things down, the better you get at the intuitions, because intuitions are just like things that you know cognitively that you've thought about so many times that you no longer have to actually like actively search for that information. This is the wrong Pigeon game. I've got the wrong Pigeon game open. A surprisingly large amount of Pigeon games in my Steam. So yeah, I'll just get that loaded up. So I remember seeing a documentary on the study of intuition before, and they were talking about when firefighters go into a burning building, right? There's been cases where like a firefighter has gone into a burning building and then they've had a bad feeling and they've evacuated everyone from the building and then it's exploded like a minute later or 30 seconds later or whatever. And the way they explained it was that there are things that that firefighter has learned over time that become almost like the equivalent of muscle memory, you know, like things that you can experience and understand so intuitively that you don't realize that you're noticing them. And in those kind of cases where someone is exercising intuition, that intuition is like 2 or 3 factors are adding up in their head and creating a sensation of this is right or this is wrong. And then they respond to it. And then it's like, oh, what happened there? I just had an intuition. But actually what was happening is they were observing like data about the world around them. And because they're a person who is specially trained in that thing or has spent a long time doing that thing, their response to it just happened subconsciously. And I think that's what we mean when we talk about intuition when it comes to things like art and design as well, is that you have spent such a long time doing the thing, made more consciously, that it becomes subconscious, right? It's almost like when you're programming and you initially have this very over-engineered solution for something, and then later on when you refactor your code, you turn it into like a subroutine or you genericize it. When you've secured a certain type of learning, you know, this is why people say, oh, it's just like riding a bike, right? When you're learning to ride a bike, you have to think very carefully about it. And you have to think, where am I looking? What are my hands doing? What are my feet doing? Same with driving a car. When you've internalized the knowledge, it becomes second nature and it almost becomes like a subroutine that you do automatically. And I think that's one of the reasons why you often get people that are very good at doing a thing but not very good at explaining it or teaching it, because they've got so good at it so early that they can't understand what it's like to not be good at it, right? So when they're trying to explain it to someone who doesn't know how to do it yet, they can't put themselves in that person's shoes. And you know, as someone who's got a background in teaching as well as game design, some people tell me, oh, you're really good at explaining this type of thing, but I often feel a big gap in certain types of things because there are certain things I don't know how to explain. Like, I don't know how to explain to someone how important it is to like teach yourself and to do the thing just because you want to do it. You know, every time I see someone on Reddit going, how do I get into game dev? I just think, well, I don't know how to explain it to you that if you want to do something, you need to just do it. So there's like, sometimes like you do something for long enough and it becomes automatic, but that also sometimes creates an empathy gap where you can no longer explain the thing very well because it's moved out of the part of your brain that needs to think about things and moved into the part of your brain where you just do it, you know. And this is why you've probably had a teacher at some point in your life that was like this. It could be like someone showing you how to cook. It could be a driving instructor. Bad teachers are often like people that can no longer remember what it's like to be a beginner. So they're just like, well, you do the thing. It's like the meme, the draw the owl meme, you know, the classic. I'll just show it. But there's too many serious how to draw an owls now, but this is the actual how to draw an owl, right? This is just like pepper eyes. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think people learn what they want to learn, right? If you really want to learn something, you'll do it. And I think some people will go, oh no, it's hard. And it's usually when people find it very hard to learn a skill, it's because there's some skill they need to learn first that they haven't secured, right? And controversially, these skills for us, like in game dev, the skills that people often struggle with and why people get stuck in tutorial hell is they don't have the kind of logical skills for programming yet, right? They can still develop that, or they lack the literacy skills to access like manuals and documentation. Because if you have a good enough sense of logic to sit down and break a feature in a game down into all of the little logical interactions, and if you have the literacy skills to read a manual, then you don't need tutorials. And the reason why people get stuck in tutorial hell is they are trying to access a level of knowledge that is higher than their than their foundational skills that they need to be able to use that knowledge well. Yeah. I'm just checking the chat because I've been rambling for a while. Tim said it's hard to teach the kids to close doors. Just have like an alligator roaming the house. They'll close the doors behind them if there's an alligator. Yeah, but this is what happens when you've got like this. Obviously this is a gag, but this is what happens when you've got someone who's been doing something so well, or maybe just from a really early age, so they don't remember what it's like to be a beginner, and they try and explain to you how to do it. You end up with this kind of thing. And that's, you know, it's one of the reasons why I don't do anything on this channel that teaches programming. One is that I don't feel like it's my strength. I can do bits of it. You know, I'm currently working on a game where I did all of the foundational programming, and now a freelancer is going through and fixing loads of it because my engineering is so bad. But it's also because I find it really, really frustrating to try and explain the like base level logic behind things. Because, and part of the thing is that people want to rush, right? People want to immediately get to the point where they can make a game, or whatever it is. If it's a piece of music, they want to get to the point where they can be Tame Impala and play all the instruments and stuff, and they're focused on the end product. And I find the basics of like just how you do the little things really interesting, and it's very frustrating to try and help or explain things to someone that doesn't find it fundamentally interesting to just, you know, write these 4 lines of code and understand how they work or whatever, because they're so focused on getting a game. So this will never be a technical tutorial channel for both of those reasons. Yeah, and Speaker, I agree with you there. Like, doing exactly the same thing over and over again, you're never going to get better. You have to sort of extend what you're doing a little bit. I'm talking more about once you get to the stage where you have secured some skills and you're trying to, like, actually release games and, like, make things for other people to play, then that's the time to maybe become a specialist to some degree. Right, I'm going to full screen this because it's killing my camera. We got Pigman. We got some Porco Rosso going on here. We got some Porco Rosso. We got some Laputa. So this is Mudtown. All those years, the Pigeon Academy leading me here. Oh, some running late. So let's do first impressions on this one. You know, we're going to do sort of cosmetic first impressions because that people will have that, right? Still killing my camera, but we'll leave it open for the chat. Right, cosmetic first impressions. What do we think? This game has a very common problem where it feels like there are chunks of the game that are final quality in terms of what it's like to look at, but then chunks of the game that feel like placeholder. And look how placeholder this looks, and look how placeholder the dialogue boxes look. And I think for a game that has dialogue and seems to like it's going to be a bit story oriented, getting this far into development where the rest of the game looks like this, which is kind of okay, and still having those text boxes that are plain grey with a very unappealing sans serif font on, is not a good look. And I think you often get this where instead of the developer sort of working in cycles and trying to get everything really tight before they move on to the next stage of production, they've just sort of rushed to make everything look like a full game and get all of the features in. And I really think a little bit more care on the kind of UI graphic design elements is going to be needed if we want to make this appealing, because the 3D looks fine, like character looks okay. I'm interested in the premise. I like a floating island. I like a floating vehicle. We've got some sort of box delivery mechanic, which makes sense. So am I going to take that and put it on my boat? Attach the strap. Oh, cool. Okay, so if we don't have that, it's gonna bounce around and do physics shenanigans. Who's this? Who are you? So, you're the new recruit? Yes, sir, I'm Jules. Late is what you are. It might be lost on you squabs, but we value punctuality here. Sorry, sir, reporting for duty. Your delivery is waiting, so is the recipient. Okay, recipient is the mayor. He'll be by the large house across the bridges. Believe me, you can't miss him. Okay. This is a weird dialogue choice. These are both essentially the same thing. I can't work out which of these expresses a different thing. They feel very similar. I would avoid having dialogue choices just for the sake of having dialogue choices. They need to sort of have two ideas of what type of character this character can be, or two or three ideas, and then make sure that the dialogue choices represent that type of character, right? Because at the moment, those two dialogue choices we got there were not different enough to really warrant being a choice. Where are the pigeons? A good question. It's locked. Okay. Oh, are you telling me I need to deliver a letter to the mayor in town? Is that what you're saying? So here. So we're not doing... Okay. That's a little bit confusing because I know the premise of the game and I see that boat, so I just immediately go into the boat and think I'm delivering something with the boat. It said past the bridges. Those are the bridges. Is this the mayor's house? Excuse me, are you the mayor? Oh my goodness, we've got buildings you can just walk straight through. The letter was on the table. Okay. I'll go back up. I'm glad someone's paying attention because I'm not. There we go. Oh boy, I don't think he likes me much. So the mayor is past the bridges, is what I was told. So we're not flying yet. Are you the mayor? That's a mayor hat if I ever saw one. Yes, valuable citizen. Mr. Mayor, I have an urgent letter for you. A young carrier pigeon with an urgent letter. What could this be about? So the pigeons are just the people. Another petition. The darn lighthouse again. Will these people never cease? A lighthouse that doesn't shine is not exactly my top priority, but Eltonius might have a spare bulb. Can Eltonius help? He's an oddball, but an oddball with a lot of electrical things lying around. He might have just what is needed. Take this package and give it to Eltonius. Your postmaster will tell you where to go. Now, shoo! I thought a mayor would want to do everything to help his constituents. Okay, so the mayor is not a great guy. We know that. We can see that there's a lot of parcels around the world, so I guess some of those you're going to be running around gathering and putting on the ship, which is fine. The thing about, like, any kind of situation where you're asking people to just go around, find objects and move them somewhere, you got to ask, is that a sort of complex enough activity for to expect an adult to pay money to do, right? I know that sounds a bit harsh, but your audience on Steam is largely adults. Children have all been captured by Roblox and Fortnite, so you need to make your gameplay complex enough for an adult. But you can have a simple game of like carrying things around and putting them in different places. But if you do that, you need to have multiple things to do at once so you can choose which to prioritize, right? Which is how most of those kind of cozy game life sims work, is that they give you lots of very simple things to do, and then it's your choice which order you do them in and stuff like that. So hopefully as this game develops, we'll see a few things to do at once, and we'll have to sort of prioritize. Because at the moment, if it's just going to be like, do this chore, now do this other chore, that's going to be really, really sort of unsatisfying and not deep enough for a game aimed at adults. And I hope once we're out of this initial bit, we get a little bit more of a kind of crossover of like priorities or something. The lighthouse has gone dark. I need to find Eltonius. Okay, nothing right now. So I've got the option to progress the quest, or the option to say, no, I don't want to progress the quest, let's exit this menu. About time. Eltonius, that lunatic, lives up on the hillside, short flight away. I'm throwing you into the deep end here. You handle this lighthouse business. You'll need your wings to see this through. My wings? Does that mean I'll get my own Culver skyboat? She's seen better days, rust and scrapes, a leak or two, but she's the most reliable companion a carrier has out here. You'll find a dock nearby. Okay, let's do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna put my package in the boat. Put it in. Strap it. Finally, it's time to enter. Undock. G. It looked like I moved onto a line there. Where do you live, Eltonius? Oh, this feels fun. This is nice. So we've got a speed. We can go backwards. It does a beep when it goes backwards. Where are we going? Did he say it was along the power lines? The problem with doing voices is you forget to actually listen to what you're saying. I think he said the lighthouse was along the power line, so I'm going up there. But guys, I know we don't want to copy everything from AAA games because sometimes they're too handholdy, but there is a reason why over time we've made them more like, here is an arrow pointing you in the right direction. But What's going on up here, eh? Interesting. So do I need to report back that the guy's dead? Interesting. I don't know if there was some graphics setting that was making things not load in quick enough. Yeah, I think you are supposed to be able to see a lighthouse. That is their one job. But maybe that's why we need to send him this letter. It's like, hey, have you considered turning the lighthouse on? Follow the power poles and deliver the package to it. Altonius. Okay. See, I'm well aware that a minute ago I was trying to do that from memory and I hadn't even looked at the quest stuff at the top. It sort of doesn't help that it's white on white. Okay. Eltonius, you might be on an invisible island, but... What does that say? Right, we're gonna... It's time for a leap of faith. Okay, that's what happens if you just jump off the ship. You get a little balloon. Which I think is quite nice and forgiving, given that this seems like it's supposed to be a, you know, cozy, non-punishing game. But yeah, why is there I don't know, we've got a first quest in the game and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't load. I'm just going to check my notes, see if there's anything from the dev that is like, oh yeah, the game only goes up to halfway through the first quest. Because I do have on my spreadsheet where people send the submissions in, they go into a spreadsheet, I get a little bit of information. Sometimes, okay, so Pigeon Guild says, oh, it doesn't say anything about the game, it just says, I enjoy watching your content, which is nice. Teacup. Thanks for the update. Right, let's just start again and see if the island loads. We don't know why it doesn't. Why is there grass in the sky? It's special. It's a flying world, anything could happen. I like the animatics. I know they're maybe not what you intend for the full game, but they give you a good sense of what's going on here. It's like a little Professor Layton type interlude, you know? One way to make sure this is coherent is if when you polish those animatics, make sure you're using the same colors like picked from the 3D world. That will make it all gel very, very easily. Probably the easiest way to make two art styles in a game go together is just make sure they have a really consistent palette between them. Yeah, the ship is cute. Right, if I look over there now... Oh, it's loaded this time. Okay, cool. Okay, blah 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 blah. Cool. Give me the letter. Go see the mayor. I wonder if it's a different mayor this time. Mayor. Yes, valuable citizen. Oh, it's the same mayor. Okay. Everyone has a not sorry to bother you answer. Which could be fun if there's situations where you might want to use it, but I don't know how useful it is in the situations I've seen it in so far. Just like, yeah, I don't want to do that thing yet. But I could see that get interesting if you started to get to a point in the game where you had like competing priorities, which again is how to make a game with simple mechanics interesting. Smell? I like this. We can examine the box, we can smell it. We can shake it. We can weigh it. That's fun. Although it feels like maybe it's a violation of privacy, I don't know. We're gonna go and fix the lighthouse. That's what we're doing. Okay, we're gonna go to Eltonius. It's gonna be Elton John. Ah! Ah! Maneuvering the boat is very, very fun. And it's like, it's very low stakes, you know, we're not worried about falling out or dying or anything. It's just a case of, if you don't drive well, then you kind of waste a bit of your time, right? And that's fine. That feels good. But it's a little bit awkward to maneuver, and that's good because otherwise there wouldn't be anything to sort of learn and get good at, right? Can I walk through these? I can't walk through these. I could only walk through those ones in town. Some sort of Naruto jump. What's that? I'm taking a thing off the ground. I don't know what it is. Excuse me, have you stopped doing your job? Now that's a Miyazaki character if I ever saw one.
Well, hello there, youngster. Careful where you step. Glass everywhere. Had a bit of an explosion.
Nothing right now, sir. Am I supposed to help you with the... I'm supposed to bring you your parcel, aren't I? I forgot about that. This is exactly what happened with the pizzas on Tuesday. Eltonius? Angel's Corso, sir. Your new local carrier. Got a package for you and an urgent request. I like the typewriter effect. Right. We need to go to Scabs to get a light bulb. Okay, we need to go back and find out. I don't know who this is for. I'm guessing these boxes that are around the place, I'm supposed to take them to the post office and put that in that thing in the wall. So I'm going to take this with me. This is what I like, right? We've got a bit of optionality here because we've got a main story that we're pursuing, and then we've got a main story that we're pursuing, and then we've got like little optional things we can do off the side, which immediately starts to make the player feel like they have some sort of agency over what they're doing, even if it's a very simple choice between do I just do the story or do I do the extra thing as well, right? That's enough choice to feel like a choice. And that's what you want to give people most of the time. Or they'll just feel like they're doing a string of activities that you've given them, and that can feel, again, not stimulating enough for what most adults want from a game. Even a cozy one. Oh. I like that we can do this. We can look in the ship. Now this is obviously scope creep, but a very small one. This wall, when I turn around here, there's this wall that I'm very, very close to. And it's just a nasty blue wall. But that would be a really good place to do some storytelling, right? Of like, as you progress through the story and you help people and stuff like that, this gets filled up with like little postcards or things that people have given you. Maybe we just need to make this bit a bit longer so we're not like looking straight at the wall when we turn around. Either that, or you lock the view so you can't look all the way back. But I think this big plain wall is maybe like a sort of a place that would be ideal for some sort of pinboard. If you think of like they do this in Night in the Woods, where you have like your pause menu has a progression to it, so as you do more things in the story, the pause menu it's like the player character's diary, and it has little sketches in it. You could do a similar sort of thing with that, if it's going to be persistent throughout the game and the main like vehicle you're using. That would be kind of neat. Let's drop this off here. I'm not going to be paying much attention to what we're doing here story-wise. I think people can kind of check that out in their own time if they want to. We're just kind of treating it as fetch quests and then seeing how the game feels, and like, again, first impressions of lots of things. Obviously, we've seen some bugs. I think there is a fantasy here that is very, very appealing. And it's very easy to like go, oh, I'm going to make a sort of Ghibli-esque chilled out game, and just not really understand how what you're doing as a player is interesting. But I think this is doing that quite well, right? We've got the walking around part. Someone earlier said, oh, maybe it would be better if you just did the boat and not the walking, but it creates a sense of like contrast between when you're walking around and when you're piloting the boat. It says I still need to ask the postmaster about this, so I'm going to go back up. Obviously, we've got some art that is still placeholder, and okay, how do I get to Scab's Emporium? They say he puts up signs, blue and yellow. They aren't hard to miss. Follow them. Okay, there's a map at the town square. So yeah, we've got some placeholder art. There's other things about the art I could say that we'll maybe talk about in a minute. I really think you want to do a pass on the text and making the UI and stuff look nice before you do too much else, because, you know, you've made a narrative-driven game with lots of text that people need to read, so that's like a very central part of the game. It's worth trying to get it right early, because it's probably not more than a day's work to just... I think the kind of flat design, that sort of Breath of the Wild translucent grey boxes with simple text is fine, but the typographic choices make it look really cheap at the moment, and it makes it feel a little bit like a Roblox map rather than an indie game. Pepper Eyes said color grading. Yeah, we can. What I'm going to do in a minute is we're going to stop and we're going to workshop some stuff that would be really easy to do with this game to make it look way prettier. And I'll do that by like screenshotting stuff and put it into Canva, because a lot of the things we can do to make this look nicer are sort of things you could probably do in any game engine. Like most game engines support LUTs or whatever to do color grading. One thing what I will say now about art choices is that all of these little flying islands have sort of grey granite at the bottom of them, and it makes the overall color palette look a little bit cold. And if the bottoms of these flying islands were more kind of muddy and brown, I understand that doesn't make as much sense structurally, but it would mean we're dealing with more warm colors and less grey. And I think when you're trying to make something look cheerful and friendly, grey is your enemy, and like going, oh, I need to put grey because it's rocks is like the wrong-minded way to think about art direction, because you want to pick colors based on how they create the mood of the thing rather than whether it's realistic or not. So I think either replacing all of this, not all of this stone, but some of this stone with a brown or something. See, it looks nice now because the sky is turning to purple and we're getting that nice purpley hue on the grey, so the grey becomes purple, which is the kind of old, if you watch like episodes of The Simpsons when it's set at night, they always do that. They have like a kind of color grading that makes all the greys into purple and stuff. So the sign said it was over here, but this looks like it's going to be a massive gap to cover to get there. You can see getting lost is going to be very easy in this, but at the same time I sort of like the difference in distances. If you've played Dredge, you get that a lot in that. It's like you're initially just going from island to island in a small range, and then you start to go really far, and that's both time consuming, which is good because it makes you have to really think about where you're going, but it does kind of create this big epic sense of scale. Well, there's a building over there. I don't think it's an emporium, but that looks more like a church than an emporium, but we're going to go to it. And then we're going to do some screenshots and have a little think about some of the art direction here, because there are types of games where you can get away with being a bit more ropey with these types of things, but because of the fantasy and the sort of people who are going to like this idea, they're going to be people that are quite picky about how things look, right? So it matters to get it right earlier, because the sort of people that are attracted to a Studio Ghibli, Laputa, Porco Rosso cozy game about delivering things in the sky are also going to be very picky about the aesthetics of it. And I think the basic art of the game, everything we see in the 3D world is doing okay, but the graphic design and the lack of post-processing is making it feel a little bit cheap at the moment. Here we are. Oh, we did make it to the Emporium. The map of Demonia. Gab's Emporium. The volcano. The hillside, the mud town, the fog of death, the Bonehenge. This all sounds quite dark. And I haven't seen anything so far that suggests that this is a dark, scary world. And everything has really scary names. Hello, Scabs. Amazing charms on the ship. That sounds really appealing. Hello.
Howdy. Have a look around.
How are you going to talk, Scab? He says howdy, so...
Howdy. Have a look around. I got one of everything. And a few more to boot. Looking drab? I ain't sure you're in position to fire off those shots, youngster. Looking like you do. Look at here. Brand new pants, big hat, bigger mustache.
No, sir, I'm in a hurry.
Wanna buy 'em? Any of 'em. Mustache will fit you nicely.
I didn't mean...
Dag nabbit, out with it. What's your offer? I'll throw in a free cat, almost alive.
I'm the new carrier from the guild. You're looking to marry someone named Bill? Excellent, this is some good characterization. And we're not going to read all this right now. I like this. I really, really like this comedically large lighthouse bulb. That's very funny to me. That's good. So I'm going to strap that in, and then rather than drive that back, let's do a little bit of a kind of workshop with this. So I'm going to take a screenshot that we can manipulate in a minute. Oh. And we'll just leave that running so we get the lovely music, which is lovely. What we need to do is get Canva open. I would be wary of weapons in this game because I think your core audience for this are not going to be attracted to it having weapons. You know, it feels cozy, it feels like it's not meant to be that sort of thing. And obviously, you know, you can make whatever you want. That should go without saying. But there is, I think it's important to make sure that the tone and the setting of your game in the first 30 minutes give an accurate sort of idea of what the game is going to be. You don't want to like present people with one type of game and then sort of pull the rug out from them afterwards, which I think making this into a combat game would do that, I think. Let's just do a little bit of kind of thinking about visuals as well in here. I'm just going to take a couple of screenshots. Sorry, I'll get the game back open in a minute. I'm just trying to get a couple of shots of the game from different locations so that we can see different things. Quite difficult actually. I'm going to just drive the boat somewhere else. Maybe one like that, I don't know. Hear me out, weapons. Yeah, it's just a case of like how piloting the boat is already quite hard, right? So you don't want to go down the route of setting people up to think this is going to be a very chilled game where you're not fighting or facing any peril, and then suddenly it's a game about fighting and facing peril later on, right? So maybe resist the temptation to, you know, like I said, make what you want, but if you're thinking of this as a commercial project, and you obviously are because you've already got a Steam capsule done and everything. Yeah, you've already said it's a non-combat RPG, right? So you've already put a flag in the sand and said this is the experience we're going for. Yeah, sorry, I was mistaking some sarcasm there because I can only do so many things with my brain at once. So the biggest initial ick that people are going to get in this game is going to be the typography in the interface. You know, setting aside some of the obvious bugs like being able to walk through buildings and, you know, not having a good time when things don't spawn in and stuff like that. So if we were to pick a couple of games that have a similar sort of mood or appeal, so I'm just trying to look at what Professor Layton's UI does. It's not super appropriate as a reference point because it's pixel art, but there are some things about the visual language we can still take from this. And one of them, if we look at the typography in Professor Layton, right, it's all very rounded. And when you come to doing typography, it's like you have a couple of different directions you can go in with how you do text. And sans serifs, like stuff with no serif, is generally seen as simple and clean, right? And then stuff with serifs is going to read as being more decorative, old-fashioned. But then within that, you also have like a rounded font feels friendlier and softer than a squarer font. So this one at the top, barn shrift, has no serifs, but it's also got like quite square O's, which makes it feel a bit kind of more like a corporate serious font. Whereas something like this is a sans serif font, but it's very rounded, and that makes it feel friendly, which makes it feel appropriate for this kind of cutesy anime setting, right? So if we were to pick a new font for all of the typeface in this game, I'm just going to fake your text box. And look, I don't do this every stream, but I think this is an appropriate game to do this with because it feels like this is the weakest area of the game at the moment. And it may totally be that you know all of this stuff and you don't need help with it, but just, you know, this is what we do on this stream. We use people's games to talk about other things that other people might find helpful. So if we were going to, this text at the top, again, it feels like placeholder. It makes it feel like a sort of hobbyist Roblox experience, quite frankly. And the thing is that the fix here is very simple. So courier, let's just make a fake text box here. Hot dang, I love me a hot dog. I love me some hot dogs. That's what he's saying. That's his line of dialogue. Let's get a few more examples before we go all in on picking something out. So I'm going to look at Pokemon. Think about the typographic choices they've made for this. So again, it's a clean sans serif font. It doesn't have these decorative bits like this one. And serifs are these decorative bits, right? They will put on... historically, they were either produced by someone doing flourishes with a quill pen, or they were produced by the edges of stamps on like typewriter keys and stuff, which were designed that way to prevent the ink pooling and to protect the printing device, which is why you have the association with wanted posters in the Wild West and those big chunky letters. It's how they were printed, right? So we create these associations about settings and different historical backgrounds of typefaces based on the methods that we use to make them. So that's why serifs feel old-fashioned. So both of these, both the Professor Layton example and the Pokemon example, they have a more modern no serif font, but it's not a serif font like this one, which is square. It's more of a rounded one. So if we zoom right in, we can see, okay, it's got harsh edges, but all of the E's and O's and C's are more round. So if we were going to pick something like that for here, we wouldn't use barn shrift because it's actually quite a tall font, which makes it look a bit more serious. That's too dense, right? That's too thick for a main font. We would pick something like, I don't know what we've got here, but just something with a little bit more character that feels a little bit more friendly, because all of these very thin, sparse Arial type fonts feel too much like a default. You know, that's too dense for something that you're reading like whole sentences in. Maybe if I put round in the search bar, obviously this doesn't really matter because you're going to have a different set of things you have access to. That's better. That's a little bit closer. That feels friendly, right? It feels in line with the sort of thing that we're doing here. I'm not saying that's perfect, but it's closer to what we would expect, because again, we're gonna what players will do is they will see this aesthetic, they will see this fantasy, and it will associate it with other things in their head, which is going to be like this and this. And if it's a Studio Ghibli movie, then they might be thinking of like more curly decorative typefaces, and maybe you could go down that route of having those in certain places. But using one of these more rounded fonts is just going to immediately make it look like you've made more deliberate aesthetic decisions about the graphic design. Let's try Montserrat for the name. Yeah, I have Montserrat on my website, actually. It feels... That could be good. Yeah, it depends how much dialogue you have each time. And I'm going to talk a little bit about dialogue choices in a minute, but let's... Keeping on the aesthetic side, someone mentioned color grading, right? I'm going to just emulate it here with duotone, which is a bit cheeky, but with duotone effects, you can just kind of choose what the darkest color is and what the lightest color is. And you can do stuff like, okay, what happens if we just introduce like a brown filter, right? Or just some different kind of underlying color that brings everything together. And you can do this in a game engine using LUTs, and a good example of this would be there's a mod to remove it on Nexus mods. So Elden Ring is a really good example of creative use of LUTs, which is like if you're watching this and you're not familiar with this terminology, an LUT is like a filter, a visual filter that you use in video, but you can also use it in games. And it basically takes any color on the screen and forces it into a different color space and a more limited palette. And that can be a way to make a film or a game or anything visual feel a bit more painterly, because instead of having the full range of colors in the spectrum of everything that's there, you start to like force everything into similar colors. And that might sound artificial, but once you know that things do it, you won't be able to unsee it, and you'll be watching Netflix, and you start to realize as well that like costume departments will put everyone in the scene in the same range of 4 or 5, like 3 or 4 colors, so that the scene looks visually appealing. And then they'll maybe put a character in a color that doesn't fit the color palette if that character is supposed to look out of place. So there's all of this like subconscious color theory going on in every piece of visual media you consume. But in Elden Ring, every area of the map has its own kind of color grading that they do through LUTs that's quite extreme. And that's why I just found a second ago there is actually there's a mod on Nexus for people that want to remove it, because they just want to see what Elden Ring looks like without all of the really over the top color grading. But doing these sorts of things, because I notice in the game you do have lighting changes as the day goes on, and we go into like sunset, it becomes all purple. That's really pretty, that's nice. But just having like one color grade over different points of the day can really, really help to kind of tie everything together and make it look like the same world. But those are two things you can experiment with to like make this look way more premium straight off the bat. But yeah, a little bit more thought into all of the typography, because bear in mind that this is a game where this is important. This panel down here, what the characters are saying, the dialogue is important. Players are looking at it quite a lot. And that means that it's something that you should try and get right earlier. And then in terms of the world, like I said, I think the grey rock of the islands makes them look a bit austere and dark in a world that is seemingly meant to be kind of friendly and inviting. So I would think about using more browns in the color palette and less grays wherever you can. But I find the game really appealing. The game feel of driving the boat is really cool. The other resource I would really recommend is, let me just try and find it on here. What's it called? So there is a sort of narrative design theory person called Clara Fernandez Vara. And they made a... They made a sort of interactive game that teaches you how to write dialogue choices, which I think is really, really helpful. Let me try and find it. It's super old now, which is why I can't find it anymore. Give me a moment. I'm sure I've linked it somewhere else in a video, so I'm just trying to find that out for you. This is taking a little while. Having to skim read lots of things. The internet has really got worse in the past 10 years. Here we go. Here it is. Okay, I found it. So, Clara Fernandez Vara made a taxonomy of narrative choices. So what we mean by that is, in a game, when you're choosing branching choices, like dialogue choices, what types of choices can we give the player and how can we make sure that they're interesting? And this is on itch.io. I will put the link on the video description afterwards when I go and add timestamps. And what this does is it's a twine game, so you can click through the options and it shows you examples of them, right? And the way that you make an interesting game is you actively think about which of these types of choices you're putting in. So let's say, so it says, this is an interactive taxonomy of narrative choices and a primer to how providing a player with choices can take many forms. Okay, and then we play around with this. What's a fake choice? Fake choice is a kind of choice that takes the player to the same place, but the design just gives the player the illusion that they're making a choice. Fake choices are useful to avoid having to create a lot of different content. Players often assume that there is more content behind the options that they have not followed, though if they replay, they may realize they were being tricked. At times, the illusion breaks, though. The princess looks at you lovingly. Dost thou love me? I don't even know you. The princess says, but thou must. No, really. The princess says, but thou must. What is wrong with you? The princess says, but thou must. Okay, I love you, whatevs. The princess says, I knew it. I knew you were as vapid and superficial as I am. It's love at first sight. Right, so it basically gives you examples of different types of choice that you might put in a dialogue tree. And like, I think an interesting game when it comes to having dialogue trees of any sort has some sort of mix of these, so that you're not just... Because the problem with the dialogue trees in the game at the moment is when I see them, there's basically one that is to progress the dialogue and one to quit the dialogue. And it feels like when there is an option other than that, I can't really understand what I'm meant to be getting out of it as a player. You know, there was that one early on where it was like, yes, sir, I'll do anything to make everyone happy. And then the other option felt like it was expressing the same thing, you know? So I think the thing I feel about the story part of this game is that it just needs a little bit more thought in what is the player supposed to enjoy about picking those dialogue options. I think playing through this is the sort of thing where you can kind of, you know, play through it all and think about it in half an hour, and it will probably kind of make it easier to make those dialogue choices satisfying, because at the moment they just feel a little bit like they're in there because you know they should be in there, but they're not in there to do anything for the player. You know, it's not like... I think another way of approaching it is if you think of the really extreme version of this, and the reason this design pattern is used in so many AAA RPGs is because it works and it makes the game easy to follow. In Mass Effect, we have Renegade and Paragon, which is like Captain Kirk and Captain Picard. It's like they're both... It's the characters that you can play as are trying to achieve the same thing, but if you go the blue route, they're trying to achieve it by going by the book, and if you follow the red route, they're trying to achieve it by being a rebel. It's good cop, bad cop, right? And that means that all of the dialogue choices, or most of the dialogue choices, they have those things to orient what they put into the story as an option for the player. And it also means the player, you don't need to actually actively telegraph that you're doing A or B and getting points for it or whatever. But it means that the player has these two options of the way that they can play these characters. And I think, you know, Bethesda RPGs always do the good guy answer, the sort of morally grey, I want more money answer, and the absolute douchebag answer, right? And that means that it's easy for the player to understand the dialogue tree when they have these expressive options of choosing what sort of player they're playing, what character they're playing. And it also means that it's easy to write, because when you sit down to write a scene, you kind of know that you need to fulfill this quota of like one mean answer, one good answer, that kind of thing. And I think if we think about protagonists in Studio Ghibli movies, the two directions that this type of person could go, if we just see these screenshots and we don't know who this is, we can see he's actually quite intrepid, right? He's trying really hard in some dangerous situations. He's got to deliver stuff in a volcano. That's really neat. I love the idea of this scene. I think getting to that point in the game where I actually go to the volcano and have to deliver stuff might be a bit of a stretch at this stage with how clunky some parts of the game are. But I really like that this is part of the story, right? But in terms of how this protagonist talks to people and the dialogue choices we get when we're talking to people, I would think of your two extremes as one is like a really sweet saccharine character that just is always like, yes, sir, I'll do my best, that kind of thing. And the other extreme would be a little bit more bratty. And a little bit more like, oh, why do I have to do everything, you know? That's kind of a classic sort of set of traits that a Miyazaki protagonist could have, right? And I remember, is that even legal to show? I mean, they are in the game, right? They do show up in the game, so I don't, you know. This is publishing questions that I don't really care about that much. But yeah, I think to make this a satisfying character to play, you need to think of like two different ways that this character could be played in the dialogue, and then make sure that the dialogue choices have a little bit of both of those so that players can decide whether to be one extreme or the other, or mix between them. Because otherwise the dialogue options don't feel like they do anything, and it feels a little bit like It feels a little bit like you're putting dialogue options in because you think they're expected rather than to actually achieve a particular like experience goal for the player, you know, to have them sort of express anything or choose to play the character in a particular way. That's it. No, there was no actual pigeons. I'm sorry for anyone who feels that there was false advertising in this stream. You thought you were going to get pigeons and it was just a person that's called a pigeon rather than a real pigeon. I'm sorry for pigeon enthusiasts. You can have 5 minutes of Deadliest Pigeon to make up for it. Just because I seem to be making a collection of games with pigeon in the title. Yeah, that was Pigeon Guild. Go and check it out. If you like the look of it, obviously, I will put the... As I do with all of these streams nowadays, some of my older streams don't have it, but after we finish, I will go back onto the VOD. I'll put the timestamps on, and the links to play the games will be on the timestamps. But for those of you that were really hoping to see a pigeon, we can just do 5 minutes of a pigeon with a gun. I still think this game is probably in my top 5 uses of Cinti assets I've seen. Although I'm not totally sure why the dogs are zombie dogs with like flesh missing and stuff. I'm trying to play it with the mouse and I can't. I really wasn't sure about the weapons talk. Sometimes people say something being ironic and I'm like, I can only... I'm already playing and talking, which I'm not good at, and then playing and talking and passing sarcasm at the same time is like, I cannot do this. Do you think we could find enough pigeon-related games on Steam that they could make a package? Do pigeons eat bananas? I'm not going to play much more Pigeon with a gun, but I'm glad it exists. Let's see if yeah, I guess they do eat anything. That's what makes them pigeons. Let's see what else exists in the pigeon-based genre at the moment. There's a game called Pigeon. Doesn't look like it doesn't look like there's a real pigeon in it. Pigeon is an action adventure in the original universe. The original universe. Deadliest Pigeon. Pigeon poetry. Poetry pigeon, sorry. Fly frenetically between fast approaching obstacles by typing classic poems. That's neat. Flappy Bird, but you have to type. Look at this review. Contains overly pro LGBTQ+ and subtly pro DEI messaging. Woke content detector. That's a person that someone has decided to dedicate their life to that. Someone's decided that. Firstly, they've decided that this is going to be their thing they do. is detect woke content. And then after that, they've decided that basically the canon of Western poetry is all woke and gay, which is like, you know, you can hold that view, but I don't understand how we're supposed to get to thinking you're a bastion of culture and an important vanguard against the destruction of culture when your argument is basically just like poetry is inherently gay. It's just like we've got some Nelson Muntz type characters who are getting involved in the culture war and do not have the necessary critical faculties to be able to do that because they're still at the level of just thinking that all poetry is gay. Oh no, this game has Sappho in it. It's pro-lesbian because it's got Sappho in it. So yeah, it's because the gays write lots of poetry. What are you going to do about it? Pepper, I didn't even realize that they would have had to have pinned that for it to appear. That's fantastic. That's so good. I wish it was satire, but I mean, I think the type of satire where you sort of imagine a really ignorant person in the world and pretend to be them is not a great form of satire, because that person already exists enough that we don't need to like duplicate what they would say by going, oh, isn't this what an ignorant person would say? Like, yeah, I mean, lots of ignorant people are saying it. I've got another pigeon with a gun game. This is just how we're going to, last 5 minutes of the stream, we're going to look at all the things that have a pigeon in. Pigeon, a love story. That already existed. That's Hatoful Boyfriend. They've tried to make the... You're flying through swarm. That's a lot of pigeons. And they all have little messages that say things like, I'm not really looking for a relationship right now. Stuff like that. 8-bit pigeon hunter. Nobody expects exploding immortal pigeon. That's a good name. I like that title. It's a good title. It's funny as well because that title makes me think this is going to be a total like throwaway trash joke game, and then I look at the game and it's like, oh, someone put a little bit of effort into this. Actually, this is quite beautiful. I commissioned some pigeons. I paid more artists to hide pigeons and bread in 15 pieces of artwork. Can you find them all? Warning, relaxing. And someone's made a Where's Waldo book, basically. Do people buy these? I think the last time I tried to play one of these was Hidden Folks, and I was just like, oh, this is good, but I don't think it's the best this format could be. Yeah, people love it. People love it. People just love a chilled out thing to do on their computer. They've done multiple of these. I commissioned some pigeons 3 and 4. Oh my god. The isekai manga where it's just a pigeon from the real world who can't talk, right? Flies through a portal. Let me pitch you on this portal fantasy. You got a New York pigeon. They can't talk. They're from our world. Animals don't talk in our world. Portal opens. Pigeon goes through the portal. They go to a world which is like a proper Red Wall world with like animals that talk and have secret societies and weapons and stuff. And our hero is just a normal pigeon that doesn't understand what's going on, cannot speak. And all of the other characters are doing like proper Game of Thrones, Red Wall, Warrior Cats type stuff. Like having political intrigue and stuff. and our pigeon is just flying around, just doesn't understand anything, just trying to get some bread. That's a good Portal fantasy, I think. To be fair, I don't think you need to know the Spanish Inquisition to enjoy the structure of nobody expects blah blah blah. It just kind of sounds inherently silly. There's something about like an overlong title, you know, that's like why a very hard game about climbing or whatever it is a good title, because it sort of sets it up. It's sort of like a deliberately pretentious title that sounds like a literary novel or something, so that when you see it's a silly game, it makes it funnier, you know? I think it's that kind of thing. Sometimes having an overlong title when your premise of your game is quite silly can be funny in its own right. Hatoful Boyfriend. Don't know if people know about this one. It's a historical one. Hatomal and then Mediatonic sort of co-developed it and polished it. It's a dating simulator about pigeons. But they're pigeons that are people, I think. What's the bench? A pigeon training game where you're a elderly person in a retirement home. Doing loads of old man mini games while you carry your pigeon around. I didn't realize the world of pigeon games on Steam is quite rich subculture of games that we have yet to learn about. I should really get a big wheel with weird words on it, and we should spin it every so often and go, okay, we're going to play games about carrots. What would the core premise of Untitled Pigeon Game be? Well, pigeons are just very simple, aren't they? But I think the thing that's interesting about them is because they're an urban animal, they're often positioned at the center of human life, right? So you can do funny things with the pigeon. It's kind of like what you get in Untitled Goose Game. But with the pigeon, you can sort of tell stories about humans in the background that the pigeon doesn't understand. So you can have like a fun bit of dramatic irony where the pigeon is there and the pigeon is perhaps who you control in order to control the point of view of the game and everything. But the pigeon doesn't understand what's going on around it and the player does. So you can go and like listen to people's conversations and stuff. That could be quite fun. Someone kept posting a cockroach game on Steam that I don't think they really went all that far into that side of things, but they, you know, I think if you're making a game about an animal in an urban environment, then the fact that you can sort of be a stealth character that spies on humans is quite interesting, and that's kind of what is going on with things like Ratatouille and a lot of the like animal-based kids films. Is like there's this sort of subterfuge of the animals are in the human world, right? You get The Secret Life of Pets does that as well. So this is not the one I was thinking of, actually. There was another cockroach simulator that someone posted. But yeah, it just didn't do the things. I think the idea of a game about being a pigeon, obviously pigeons are funny anyway, so you give them a gun or something and it immediately becomes funny. But there's something about like being in a park where they're people and you can sort of spy on them or harass them in some way. I think could be quite amusing. You want to do something that uses the fact that it's specifically a pigeon rather than a bird, right? Because a bird is a very broad category, and they all I don't know if you've heard of birds before, but they're these flying things up in the sky and they have a pokey thing on their face. They're a bit like pterodactyls, but they're very small and they still exist. And a bird is a broad generic thing, and if you make a bird game, you can then go, oh, you can be all these different birds. But if you're specifically choosing for it to be a pigeon or a seagull, that has a particular set of stories about it that then narrows the design space down. And I know Cheese, I don't know if you're watching this, Cheese, but one of the people in our Discord, one of the games they've been working on, one of them, because this person seems to make 4 games a month, is sort of a game where you control seagulls on the beach and you get them to poo on people so that they leave the beach. And that's the kind of thing. Is I think if you're doing an urban animal that is often in urban spaces with humans, then the interaction between the animal and the humans in some way, whether it's like directly attacking the humans or trying to steal their food or just listen in on their conversations, I think that's like the interesting part of that theme, you know? I like this, where we just pick a stupid theme for a game and just spitball it for 10 minutes. We should do this more often. This was supposed to be a stream about delivering things, but we did. I mean, I delivered a bit of blood in the vampire delivery service game, which was really cool and atmospheric. Just needs a little bit more thought into how to onboard people into it, so it's not too difficult straight off the gate. And we delivered some stuff in Pigeon Guild, but yeah. Pigeon Guild, the dev in the chat has just said it will have some pigeons later on, but it's not. I've delivered good content. Oh, see what you did there. You've delivered. 77 of you have delivered a sense of worth to me. Because if I was doing this to no one currently right now, I would feel like, what am I doing with my Thursday? Humans pooing on seagulls is not. It's not right. With that bombshell, I'm going to end the stream now. I'm going to cut over to terrifying dancing low poly me for a couple of minutes, because I've been told when I cut the stream off too early, it cuts off and then you can't see the last 30 seconds of chat or whatever. Thank you all for joining today. Come back next week. We'll do a similar thing. At the moment, I'm doing the kind of audience submitted games on the Thursday, like I have been doing for the last year. And then earlier in the week, I usually play something else that's come from our community. Next Tuesday, we are playing Cracks Where the Light Gets In. Some of you would have seen me start to play that the other day and then be like, I want to do a longer stream of this. It's like a historical puzzle game where you're like a kid watching from under a bed and piecing together knowledge in your head. It looked very interesting. And then some sort of logic puzzle games on Thursday. So yeah, come back then. If you're on the Discord and you want to get stream alerts, there is a role that you can get on one of the announcements channels that will just ping you when there's a stream alert. I know I need to go and fix it today because it pinged twice. So sorry to everyone who got the double ping. And yeah, have a good weekend, and I will see you all next week.